Welcome back to Beyond the Tour. I am Jake. With me, as always, is Luke.
Jake, it's a big day in Australian sport, right up there with winning the Americans Cup and retaining the Ashes and all of the great Australian sporting achievements. Ripper GC taking out the LIV Golf Team Championship. Plenty to talk about.
How good were they?
They narrowly skated through some of the earlier rounds, but it was good to see getting back to some of his best golf.
Yeah, let's jump straight off the top. Last week we saw Cam Smith. We didn't really touch a lot on him last week, but he finished, I think it was 13 over, pretty much in dead last along with Caleb Surratt. Yeah. He was looking completely out of sorts. So he comes into this week in not great form at all. He had a bye in the first round, the Rippers.
Because they finished second, I think, going in seeded.
Day two, he hit himself in the foursomes and didn't perform very well. And Herbie was great, and Leishman was great, and I was a little bit worried.
He looked really poor.
I was ruining a couple of messages on X that I didn't send. The first one was pre-tournament saying that I think Herbie is built for this type of event, this match play, very much in the mold of Reed. There are just some people who thrive in that one-on-one, that competitive environment. I think he's one of them. Yep. He proved that, but I didn't say it, so I couldn't claim that. The other thing I was going to say was that I thought that Cam was going to absolutely bomb, and he ended up leading the Rippers to victory on Sunday he finished 4 under?
Yeah, 68
under,
final round. I thought you were going to say you were about to tweet out before the tournament that the Ironheads were going to take it out.
Oh, wouldn't it? Yes. A really compelling event. The first 2 days were awesome. That competition, and there was some sort of question marks and some commentary in and around social media around about how the final day would go. They got a really good result in the end. The stroke play, I think, in terms of a team event, is a little bit hard to follow. I think Cam mentioned it a little bit. Not saying it was hard or not compelling, but he mentioned the fact that he had to just stop looking at the leaderboard because the swings were just so huge.
I think
and we've spoken about that a little bit through the year, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. And the stroke play does provide lots of drama, lots of lead changes. And I did, similar to Smithy, I stopped looking at the scoreboard until it got much closer to the end because it really changed so dramatically throughout the course of the round. And even with Legion 13 being miles back and not really in contention, they were 2 from the lead coming down the stretch. So it certainly provides for lots of drama. It's hard to keep track on everything, but I like it.
Yeah, it was certainly, I was trying to think about whether or not I love that stroke play finish and probably leads to relatively good results as a rule. The Ironheads are probably one indicator there in terms of they didn't perform as well on that final day as they had on previous days. They still finished tied second. It's hard to follow, very hard to follow that sort of where everything is going. I think with at least the one-on-one match play, you still get the violent swings, but because it's a little bit easier to follow, I think, because you've got matches that you're looking at. You've got, say, 4 matches for example.
I think the changes aren't as fast or as dramatic. You can still get the drama, of course, in your traditional match play team event that we see at the Ryder Cup or at the President's Cup, which we'll see later this week. But imagine being the production crew in the control van trying to keep a finger on all the pulse. And I will say it was noticeable in the coverage that they were playing catch up a lot. And I think that's understandable. It would be virtually impossible to show every important shot live. But there were a lot of replays of important shots. And so it does provide a unique challenge for the production crew as well as the watching fan.
Yep. Now, the watching fan, that was one thing that caught my eye as well. It looked relatively bleak in terms of number of fans on site. Now, just doing a little bit of prep prior to this episode, I saw some photos throughout the course of the day and the course of the weekend where it looked like there were a lot more fans than what we saw on the TV cameras. So I think, Bryson, you mentioned on X that he was drawing a lot of the crowd, and I saw some photos of him today with big crowds following him. Certainly some of the overhead drones and that the 18th didn't at all feel crowded or full at all, really.
I would agree with that. And yes, there were big crowds following Bryson around. Obviously, it was a home game for him in Dallas, Texas there. So not surprising that the majority of people were out there to take a look at Bryson, both from a hometown perspective, but as we've talked about, his YouTube following and popularity's been skyrocketing. The other thing probably to keep in context was the temperatures. So they were plus 100 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, so well over 35 degrees Celsius. And all of the corporate hospitality was sold out. So I suspect if you weren't out, if you're an American not out following Bryson, you're enjoying the comfort of the hospitality tents. But agree, there were times where I was looking at the crowd and important matches had quite poor followings. The other thing that stood out to me was the course condition wasn't up to what I was expecting. We talked before on this pod, and it looked in the sort of flyover material and the promotional material that the club and LIV had put out that it was going to be in just pristine condition. But there were some patches of that course that looked really quite scrappy. And in particular, I thought the 14th tee box looked like the greenskeeper had scalped it with the reel mower. It did not look in good shape at all. So I don't know whether they've had some adverse weather conditions or some pests and disease, but their course did stick out to me as not being as primo condition as you might expect for the team championship.
Yeah, I did note that as well. It looked to me, being down on the peninsula, that's that summer linksy style. But you're right. So some of the grassing looked like it had been scalped. That's what it really looked like. And it looked very similar conditions to a lot of the courses I played out here. Certainly the other thing I think, which LIV seem to not do as much as the PGA Tour, is they don't put as much saturation in their broadcast. So you don't see, like the PGA Tour, they're what you're seeing on the screen, there's so much saturation introduced. So the greens are really green. Yep. And the LIV seems to do that less. It's noticeable that this particular LIV event, you look at social media and there are some screenshots from Americans and it just looks like bright green. It's crazy when the reality is not that at all. It's crazy how much saturation, or I think, and that's probably what everyone likes to ask,
do you think Augusta have got their thumb on the scale with the saturation conditions for their broadcast?
Yeah, but it looks a lot more natural. But yeah, the course did look like a tough summer.
That's right. But all in all, it's a great event, and certainly there were some highlights for me early on in the match play in the earlier rounds. One that stood out for me was the Kokrak GMAC foursome pairing coming down the stretch there. And Captain Brooks is walking with them, and this is the defining match about whether Smash get booted out in round one. I mean, GMAC put Kokrak in an absolute awful position, flew the green, basically dead with no chance of getting up and down. And even with free relief, there was just no chance. Given that both Kokrak and GMAC are now in the open zone, I wondered whether, as punishment, Brooksy would trade them for losing that match and seeing an early exit for Smash.
I think he was pretty embarrassed having to play that final day.
Yeah, in the cellar dweller bracket.
Yeah, that's like he come out and smashed, just went crazy round one or round two, whatever it was, when he won 6 and 5. But to finish 8 over this morning.
Yeah, what did he shoot?
On Sunday.
I'm just having a look at their scores there now. 80, Kokrak 78, and 71 for Gooch and McDowell.
That to me is a Brooks just to give up. It would be disrespectful to everybody for him to perform in the bottom, like the lowest rung.
And then, of course, the Ironheads, which we'll get to the Ironheads. Phil's High Flyers, which were the 12th seeds, knocked off Neiman's Torquay, who I actually thought were a reasonable chance of giving it a shake. They'd been there or thereabouts on a number of occasions throughout the season. Phil's High Flyers with that upset there, but was it definitely some interesting matches in the earlier rounds?
It hits different. Like it takes a different skill set. So talk a little bit about Rahm, getting used to that three rounds versus 4 rounds. It's a different cadence to that. Match play is certainly a different style. And I think you see it with the people like Patrick Reed, Tommy Fleetwood, guys who step up for that particular game. What's going to be interesting over the next couple of years, if we do get some sort of level of acceptance of LIV in the ecosystem, is perhaps seeing some specialist match play players from LIV being selected for some of the rep teams. So the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup. Someone like a Lucas Herbert, who may not, off his typical form, appeal to an international side of the President's Cup, If he performs like he has in a couple more of these match play events, maybe he becomes someone that the captain considers as a captain's pick because it's proven in that model.
Yeah, there's certainly potential for that. And as we saw the PGA of America come out and make their announcement, I know you felt that wasn't adding too much to what is already the case, but maybe just the symbolism of coming out and saying that LIV players are going to be eligible for Ryder Cup selection and for qualification at the PGA Championship. It's just another step in the right direction, in my view, and a step away from the divisive sort of politics and childishness that we've seen far too often from the governing bodies. I certainly think there's opportunity for specialist players, match play players to be picked. There's lots of form for them to have a look at and leverage.
By all reports, looks like next year we're going to be seeing a lot more of it.
Yeah, it's been really good watching.
Yeah, absolutely. I always thought that LIV could do it all and maybe have the focus on the individual with the teams on the side, similar to what Formula One does. But having seen the past couple of weeks where the focus has been on either the individual or the team, maybe I was wrong with that. Maybe we need to see more of a focus on the team, more segregation between the individual and the team events.
Or do you just have more team-only events?
Yeah, definitely. I think it will need to be a little bit strategic. If we're still going to have the 14 plus events on LIV, I think the LIV guys need some way to get their reps in before the majors, whether they split that up into a couple of different swings. So maybe you start with a team swing in early sort of Feb, and then you switch over to lead up events, being individual events prior to the majors, and then you switch back across to the team side. Or the other thing I considered is maybe pre-majors, you have a number of individual events, and then in that post-major slot, which we're seeing both the PGA Tour use their signature events, but LIV have also scheduled some post-major weeks in events. Maybe they become the match play events, so a little bit easier on the players. So you get their prep in beforehand, and then once they get through the pressure of a major, you switch to the team side. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, they've probably got a little bit more flexibility to play with their schedule than the other tours, and they have shown that they are prepared to innovate and make changes as needed. I guess we'll wait and see what happens with the team side of things. But let's just close out the conversation on Ripper. Jonesy had squandered a decent lead that the Rippers had set up there when he made double on 18. He was saved by Herbert's brilliant finish where he birdied, I think, 4 of his last 5 holes. So does this team championship win save Jonesy's LIV career? Does he get another year as part of a winning team that not only won twice throughout the year, but obviously took out the season-long championship?
It's certainly hard to break up a winning formula. And the one thing that was quite surprising to me was in the post-match hearing how confident he sounded about appearing in events next year, Jonesy. Now, a lot can change between now and then, but he seemed fairly confident that he was going to be seeing everybody in Adelaide and events next year. So whether or not he's been told that he's on the team, I don't know.
If you're Adam Scott, are you starting to have a look at LIV and say, I might hedge my bets here? I'm in the Masters until life, for the rest of my life. I've seen what the PGA have come out with in terms of the PGA. I'll take some cash, move over to LIV and take a punt that to the US Open and the British Open will open up as well.
We're pretty much 2 years down the track again now, and he hasn't been in great form in any of the majors, so maybe that changes his perspective a little bit. He certainly took sides, and he seemed to be fairly happy with taking that side in the end, because he was pretty open about listening to LIV or just happy to hear what they've got to say. And then he selected his side. Yeah, I don't see him flipping. And he doesn't seem to have the frustrations of a Rory or Scotty potentially with the tour.
I guess the other thing is it probably depends on what his extracurricular involvement is. So we've seen active at a board level for the PGA Tour, and also he's a member of this TGL that they're trying to get off the ground in only 4 months' time now. It'll be interesting to see how that all goes. But so, I was just thinking, if Jonesy was to go, who would replace him? We've previously talked about possibly Ben Campbell coming in. My son pointed out to me, though, that he thinks that the Ripper GC logo is actually the Southern Cross. I suppose that can equally apply to New Zealanders. But yeah, I just had been thinking about Scotty and who might be a likely replacement for Jonesy.
Yeah,
Anyway.
they all seem fairly set. Cam Davis would probably be the one to me, but he's just gone out and won on tour again, so he's wrapped up there. Minwoo looks like he's chasing majors and whatnot and seems fairly happy. They do seem to still have that sort of hold over that sort of on the majority of collegiate style golfers. They all seem to want to go down that legacy part, which is fair enough as well. So all grind through on the PGA Tour system. To me, someone that would suit it would be like a Carl Phillips. But he's just, I have to say, he's just wrapped up his tour card, having missed the cut in one of the Corn Ferry finals. So he's a lock for the PGA Tour next year. Which is
But is he going to be in that rung?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So he's going to finish probably in the 20s. So to the 20 of the 30 that are going to get in there. I think they'll go to the qualifying event where he could potentially improve his position. I think they give out 5 cards in the tour school or whatever. So I think they would probably go there and potentially improve that. But you're right. It didn't seem like a lot of these guys, like a Ben Eccles, I think he got his card last year. In fact, he won the qualifying event, I think. And he didn't get many starts at all through that early part of the season. So it wasn't really until it would have been March or April before he started getting a lot of starts.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess the other things that struck my eye in the LIV Team Championship, 4 aces came from nowhere, haven't shown much for a while in sort of my view, but DJ and Reed really aimed up and looked good. Perez and HV3 were certainly up and down, and they were the sort of anchor on the 4 aces boat, but they were still in it till the final hole, albeit 2 behind. But DJ's tee shot there on 18 into the water pretty much sunk them. But it was good to see signs of life from DJ and Reed. And then, of course, the Cinderella story with the iron almost taking it out from being the last seeds. Some incredible putting I saw from Kazuma. It was just freakish the way he was draining putts left, right and centre. I thought Danny Lee performed really strongly and Kevin Na was winding back the clock. Some unexpected performances, I think, that the team's championship brought out.
It did. So you got the 4 aces and the Ironheads finishing T2 in the team championship, and they finished 10th and 13th collectively. So there's a case to be made potentially that they shouldn't get the chance to finish that high, given their season-long standing. They were good storylines, great storylines over the weekends. Golf is one of those things where a weekend can change completely. Like Cam Smith is a perfect example. Probably even from the Saturday to the Sunday, it completely changed things. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that format changes ever so slightly. I would like to see a little bit less of those huge fluctuations, that maybe limit the number of teams who can win, maybe bracket pre-event potentially.
That's not a bad idea. Legion 13 finished 5 shots back from Ripper. Is John Rahm worth 5 shots?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Catlin performed really well. Him and Hatton, the way Hatton played, they would have been, if not threatening, they would have been right at the top, you would imagine.
Yeah, it was unfortunate for Rahm to have to withdraw with flu-like symptoms. Let's see whether he makes a return to health ahead of the Spanish Open this coming week. Let's hope he does. So, yeah, it was interesting just having a look at the players that performed worse in Ironheads and Legion 13, the 2 Vincent brothers, 72 and 73 respectively. They've really struggled this season and hence in the relegation zone. And just a drag there on particularly Legion 13 without Rahm as well.
Yep, absolutely. I guess probably the biggest losers of the event were certainly the Crushers, obviously Smash, probably the unlucky ones, the Stingers and the Fireballs. They both had very strong teams and I guess proven through the final day where both of those teams outperformed Tier 1 teams.
Comfortably. And the Stingers would be looking back on what could have been really, because they were up in all 3 of their matches against the 4 aces and they managed to lose it from there. And I think final match did come down to Brandon Grace and he's really been struggling this season. Just an unfortunate sort of fall from Grace, pardon the pun, for the Stingers.
Yes, but he ended up 7 under on the final day. So I think he was second on the individual leaderboard.
Yeah.
How's that? One event too late.
That's right. I like what you're saying. It can change so significantly.
Now let's move off that. And we're talking about one event too late. over at Wentworth on the DP World Tour, Billy Horschel won in a playoff over Rory McIlroy. One event too late because he probably now sitting at 17th in the world in the OWGR should be a member of the American team for this week's President's Cup.
He should be, but it seems like he might be more chance of getting picked in a Euro team than getting picked in an American team. He loves the UK over there, and it seems like crowds like him as well. Billy picking up his second win in 3 years at the BMW PGA Championship. More heartbreak for Rory. Another bridesmaid prize for him, this time beaten in a three-way playoff with Tristan Lawrence.
It was great. The event was so awesome. The sporting weekend for me, it was a lot of late nights. I was watching 13. So he's getting into the soccer. So I've decided to get into the soccer as well. I'm following the Spurs. And so that was a midnight kickoff. So I switched across from Wentworth and had the Formula One on, qualifying there and switching on Wentworth. So last night I was falling asleep as Rory was coming down the back nine on 17 and 18. He had that awesome eagle on 17. And then just dozing through the playoff. So I rewatched it again just before this. And he didn't do too much wrong this week, Rory. God, he's so consistent.
Hugely consistent. And to his defense and credit, the losses that he's had, someone's had to really play extraordinary golf. And I know it's easy to go back and talk about a few short missed putts at Pinehurst, but you still got to remember Bryson made that incredible bunker shot that's probably got up and down 1 out of 100 times. And so he has been beaten by some extraordinary play, and Billy obviously played well. I don't know how long that putt was he sank to actually take it out, but it was interesting that like Lawrence cleared the way, didn't he, for the other two to fight it out. Never really showed in the playoff.
Yeah, no, he certainly didn't. They picked up a McIlroy birdied that first playoff hole.
But he's certainly someone to keep a close eye on, though, Lawrence, isn't he?
Yeah.
He showed at the Open this year that he's got what it takes to get his name up on the leaderboard at the big events. The leaderboard here was another strong leaderboard. Could easily have been one of the signature events leaderboards on the PGA Tour. It was a good tournament. A shame for Rory, and I guess we're happy to see Billy Boy get the W. I like it. He seems to be good.
He was a bit of a mouthpiece, and then he become a little bit more flexible. But he seems to be appealing to a lot of different fan bases now, a lot of different fan groups.
He was certainly respectful in his post-win interview where he largely said he's happy to get the W, but he does really feel for Rory missing out again. I thought that was gracious for him to say.
The 18th, I don't know why they're still playing that as a par 5. They're all hitting their second into the green there. It'd be a bit more compelling if they're playing as a tough par 4.
Yeah, well, I saw Rory hitting iron in. I don't know what sort of iron he was hitting, but you see this a lot with the par 5s now, don't you? Like they're really, for these guys, with the technology and the distances that they're hitting it, they really are only par 4s. And I'm with you. Let's just knock the par down to what it really is for these guys. If it's 5 for the members, so be it. But let's change it up for these guys.
So that's 2 weeks in a row where the DP World Tour has had pretty great events, like Royal County down and Wentworth to back it up. I think it sort of highlights, given a little bit of space, that golf around the world can shine a little bit. Whether or not this message starts to sink in with the PGA Tour, I'm unsure, but it is now is a good time. There's enough time left in the year to let some of golf around the world take center stage. And in all honesty, I think with the PGA Tour's new structure, with the full season, probably will allow it to shine a little bit more.
I hope so. This is the reason why we are supporters of LIV, is because it gives an opportunity for golf, professional golf, to take the stage in markets outside the US. And this is a prime example of that. So you're right. Where the PGA Tour takes a breather, provides some space for golf to flourish elsewhere, it absolutely does. The crowds were sensational there, and we've seen similar where once it gets to Australia, the crowds will follow so long as the players are there.
Over on the LPGA Tour at the Queen City Championship, Lydia wins again.
What a dominant year she's having. She's just got the golden touch at the moment, blistering 63 in the final round there to win by 5. And not as though it was a lackluster field either. The leaderboard was pretty stacked with Korda, Sasso, Titikul, Rio. But yeah, Ko just too good, stormed home for the win.
They've had a pretty good season, the LPGA Tour, with Nelly. Probably didn't get enough coverage because, well, she was at 6 wins in a row, was it?
That's right.
5 or 6 wins in a row. Yeah.
It is unheard of. The other thing that stood out to me about this particular LPGA season is just how regularly the tour is getting the top names together at events. And you kind of contrast that to the PGA Tour where they're outside of the signature events, you're barely getting any decent names. So they do seem to turn up each week.
I think it's a money thing. It's a bit more of a grind for all of them. So I think that's got one of the big reasons they get that pull, because you see it on other circuits as well. Maybe not so much the DP World Tour, but certainly on the Corn Ferry, you don't see players missing too many events. The Asian Tour is, again, quite similar. It's more of a job. So they're having to turn up when there's money around to earn it.
Yep. And then the Aussies, Grace Kim was our best placed at T19, Minji and Kiriakou at T27, Ruffles at 45, and then I think it was miscut for Naveed and Choi had a 61st finish. I'd like to see the Aussie girls up in the top 10 a bit more often.
All right. Now, this week we have the President's Cup at Royal Montreal in Canada. So the 3 Aussies playing Adam Scott, Minree Lee, Jason Day. That one is tough for the Aussies for our viewing schedule because that's another sort of 2 a.m.-ish sort of start.
Yep. Not great viewing schedule, although if you can deal with a 4 a.m. wake up, you won't miss too much and you can still get a fair bit of decent viewing in. Look, this is going to be a rout for the American team, isn't it? They'll run roughshod over the internationals, you would think. The only hope will be a raucous Canadian crowd getting behind the international team and trying to really whip them up into a frenzy. I'm a bit nervous about what the results might be.
I have a feeling it'll end up very similar to what the Solheim Cup does. They'll just come out, the Americans will come out and essentially close it out in day 1 or 2. You'll see a bit of a fight back in the singles, and it might be a sort of 3 or 4 point differential. So the end result might not look as one-sided as the actual event's going to be.
That's almost the result, isn't it?
Yeah.
Strings, there's never really any contest there.
Yep. Now, the other event of note this week is the Spanish Open on the DP World. Of note, because we'll see if Jon Rahm's going to be fit enough to play. It being the flu, you'd probably anticipate that he is. Maybe he's not going to be at peak sort of Jon Rahm performance, but he's joined by quite a few other sort of names in that particular event. Tommy Fleetwood's playing, Shane Lowry, Hatton, Pat Reed, David Pooge will be there. Aaron Rye, who also had a decent week at Wentworth this week.
Yeah, your boy Rye, he's had a really good season, hasn't he? Wearing the twos and slow playing everybody to death.
He would have been in his element at Wentworth with that drizzly rain the last couple of days.
That sums up his golf game.
Oh, goodness. Relatively small purse. It's 3.25 million. I don't think it's really about money.
Paying for almost the same money that the ladies are going to be playing for in Arkansas. Yep. So not a huge purse by any stretch of the imagination. That's
Madrid or in Madrid. So it'll be interesting to see what crowds are. We were talking a few months ago about Andalusia, the LIV event there. Now, we'll compare it to the Spanish Open here in Madrid, in and around the sort of, I think it's second most populous city in Spain. So we'll see how the crowds turn out for that event.
Yeah, I would expect they're going to be pretty good, particularly if Rahm plays. They're going to get behind their town hero and really support that. You've got some other Spaniards in the field and the likes of Pooge, etc. I think we've only got Jason Scrivener in the entry list so far. I haven't seen what's happened to Micheluzzi. He hasn't been floating around in any of these events of late that I've seen. Yeah, Scrivener looks to be the sole entrant at the moment, and that probably kicks off on Thursday night, I suspect.
Yep. And then on the LPGA Tour, we've got the Walmart Arkansas Championship. So that's in Arkansas. That's $3 million purse. Notables in the field, we've got Lilia Vu, Celine Boutier, Corpus, Hataoka, Sasso, Lauren Coughlin. Mm-hmm. The Aussies, Kiriakou, Ruffles, Naveed, and Robin Choi.
Yeah, probably a bit of a sleeper event, this one in Arkansas. I don't know. Despite the decent notables there, I don't know how much of it I'll get to watch, particularly in view of the President's Cup being on.
What else probably was touched on a little bit around talk of more match play on the LIV circuit next year. I guess we're probably seeing the first sort of rumors of LIV guys jumping ship or being pushed out. Jay, or Pro Golf Critic, spoke about potentially someone being offered guaranteed events and money to come back to the PGA Tour next year.
Yeah, we spoke last week that the end of the LIV season marks the start of speculation season. I wasn't expecting it to be speculation in this form. It was more sort of speculation about who might be joining LIV and who they'd be chasing. But this rumour that, I guess reading between the lines, as a fairly big name player from LIV is being offered a pathway back to the PGA Tour, starts the mind racing about who that might be. Have you got any thoughts?
I don't think it'll be that big of a player. I think there's still enough money in for, so maybe, I really don't know who it would be. I don't think it'd be a Hudson Swafford. The PGA Tour would be stupid to offer him anything.
No, the Tour would only want a named player to go back. I
Yep.
did note in his tweet something along the lines of, this person has too much integrity to go back on their word. That might spark a DOJ concern as well. Just be very interesting to see behind the scenes who that might be. Brooks, I've got to say, I thought when Kokrak and McDowell lost that match, the camera panned to Brooks on the green, and I thought he was going to be like just steaming, absolutely seething with rage, and he looked happy as Larry. And then when I saw that tweet, I thought, maybe he's happy as Larry because he's out of there and he couldn't care less. And he goes out and shoots.
Yeah, I was thinking about whether or not it would be Brooks. I don't think it would be. I think he's got it pretty good, and if they re-up for another big contract for him, I think the fact that he's a team owner, so maybe I think what you potentially could get Brooks upset, maybe if he didn't have a lot of control over the team, over Smash, maybe more of a puppet. And if that was the case, then I could see him getting upset about that potentially. Yep. But I don't think you're moving him with money or anything like that. I think he's pretty happy with the sort of schedule that you probably got on LIV. And so I'd be very surprised if it was Brooks. Yep. But I think the thing we are going to see some player movement, which I'm excited for because it gives us something to talk about. And just there's so many different reasons to jump ship. Obviously, primarily it will be to further advance someone's career, which is generally money. Players can get stale playing in a particular environment. I think we're going to definitely see some people jump ship from LIV. Whether or not that would be a big blow from the PGA Tour side, it's certainly going to be put out through the press that it's a big blow. You'd anticipate that LIV would be able to match any blow and blow the PGA Tour out of the water.
Yeah.
Anything that they
respond with equal and opposite blows.
I don't think that's a war you want to get into.
No, it's not, which is surprising why the deal hasn't been sealed as yet between PGA Tour Enterprises and the PIF. But we've talked until we're blue in the face about this one. It just seems strange that you wouldn't lock that down and take a major competitor off the board, but that's not the strategy at the moment, it would seem.
No, I'm just getting the bits and pieces are coming out where it seems like it's very close and then it's not close and then it seems to have swung about. I don't know if wouldn't have spoken last week about the PIF and also some of the meeting or some of the sticking points were around Rahm and co giving back some of their advance from LIV
ridiculous
before they're going to be able to come and join the PGA.
As not wanting to travel.
Yeah. I'd be very surprised if either party is sitting at the table discussing that sort of crap still. But we then saw Joel Beal come out with sources from, I'd imagine, the PGA Tour side, saying that they're not sticking points at all. But the narrative around his story was how to fit LIV into and integrate the players back into the PGA Tour. Almost LIV as an afterthought, which I thought was equally as surprising. Because
we've already done this path, right? We've already been down this path of, LIV's going away. We've heard it so many times, yet it's still here. The PIF is still putting money behind it. And you'd have to think that the more this drags on, the more the PIF becomes pot committed. There'd be some personal reputations at stake here, particularly Yasser in front of the king, the Saudi king. And I'm sure he is not going to die without getting a return on this investment. So if that means you've got to go nuclear, then I suspect that'll be where it has to go.
Dave Portnoy from Barstool was on the All In podcast earlier in the week, and they touched a little bit on, they're talking about it from the perspective of gambling and whether or not that's increasing the value of sports leagues and franchise teams, etc. And Dave touched on the fact that not so much gambling, but it was more the PE, the private equity coming into it. And the fact that the NFL has voted to allow PE to come into ownership, into team ownerships. And Dave was talking about what's unique about sports teams is it's the ultimate toy for billionaires. Like there is not enough teams and there is well and truly much more demand. So the valuations of teams are going to go up at a much higher. Valuations may not make sense because they don't need to make sense because someone's willing to buy them. And they're the biggest toy you could own potentially for any of these guys. Now, they went on to then talk about how players could maybe get a team ownership. And Dave was talking about players like LeBron and whatnot, where he doesn't see it really occurring because by the time someone like LeBron has probably earned his share of a particular team, he's past it almost. And why would someone give him money when he's past it?
That's right.
Now, what's unique about LIV is that these teams that the captains have got ownership in are brand new and they've got the ownership. So they're in a very unique position where they're going to be able to probably leverage the value of using this concept Dave was talking about to sell these teams eventually with a substantial ownership share already.
Joe Pomp did a really good pod on Messi and how he chose to take a lesser cash contract for an equity stake in, I think it's FC Miami. I think
he gets a portion of sales.
That's right. So I thought that was really insightful. And this is where I think you've got some of the old thinking from PGA Tour days looking down its nose at some of the newer thinking that LIV is trying to implement. And I guess we see that innovation generally wins out in the end.
Yes, we're talking a 25% stake holdings for a lot of these guys. And $1 billion is probably not touching the sides in terms of sports franchise valuations.
Not when you're talking in the American markets. And I guess that's one of the challenges that LIV does have at the moment is that it's struggling to break through into the American market. But if they can crack that as well as the global presence, then you would think what you're saying is absolutely right. $1 billion be very conservative.
It may not make sense, but maybe it doesn't need to.
No, the stock market doesn't make sense. There's plenty of companies on the stock market that are trading at numbers that are well in excess of their income or earnings. So it does show how sentiment and intangible factors impact valuations.
Let's finish on Jeff Guan, the young Aussie who played in Napa on the PGA Tour last week. Was hit in his eye from an amateur partner playing in a pro-am and ended up being airlifted into Sydney. There's not too many details outside of that, outside of I think he's undergone or preparing to undergo a couple of different surgeries. Yeah, that's relatively sad news.
Yeah, fingers crossed for Jeff that can all work out in his favour. I saw that the PGA of Australia and Golf Australia put out statements on social media just providing an update on what had happened to Jeff and asking for his privacy to be respected. So clearly it's a serious situation, a good sort of young talent, and hopefully he can make a full recovery.
All right, I think that's it, Luke.
I think that's a wrap.
Yep, I think that's a wrap. You're off on holidays.
Yeah, off to Coffs Harbour for a week, watching my young fella play a bit of touch football at the National Youth Championships down there. Actually, I got him out for his first 9 holes at Royal Queensland yesterday afternoon. So that was a great sort of father-son afternoon. It was a special moment.
He was representing the Rippers.
He must have felt something in his bones. So he had a Rippers hat on and they came through with the win for him this morning.
How does he watch the LIV at all? Or
he'll watch bits and pieces of it. Both of my boys say to me that they love playing golf but hate watching it.
Yeah.
So I think they're just at that stage where they just want to get a club and ball in hand and actually give it a go. Definitely trying to squeeze golf in amongst the litany of other sports that they have is a challenge, but I really want to make some time And we teed off at 4:22, I think it was, yesterday afternoon. And I won't say that we got 9 holes in, because coming down the 18th, we played the back 9 at RQ. So coming down the 18th, there was virtual darkness. We couldn't see our balls. So we got 8 holes in. And to his credit, on the party hole, so the 17th, the short par 3 that we'll see at the PGA Championships later in November, parted off the stick, had 8 foot for birdie and narrowly missed. So not bad for his first time round.
It's interesting because I was talking about my son getting into the soccer. The consumption of it is really interesting. I want to get in and watch the whole game. He's more than happy. He's sort of 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock tee-offs or kickoffs, but he's happy just to catch up with the 3-minute review of the next morning. And that's how he consumes content. It's crazy the difference. Usually consume, I want to see it live and whatnot. I think that's changing. The younger generation doesn't need to see live sport.
No, as you say, they can consume it at a condensed version, and they can watch multiple different sports rather than sitting on the couch for 5 hours watching the final round of whatever tournament it might be. I think also for my boys, it depends on the importance of the tournament. So if it's a regular LIV event or PGA Tour event, that probably got zero interest. If it's the Masters or the US Open, it'd be a different kettle of fish, particularly the Masters, because they've played that course before on Tiger Woods' PlayStation.
All right, have a good week, and we'll speak again next after the President's Cup.
Sounds good.